Yo, you're listening to Journey to Truth podcast Decrypted with Joy Jack.
Decrypted.
No, before we get started, so we're officially sponsored now. So Journey to Truth podcast is brought to you by Omnia Radiation Balancer, which if anyone has listened to our episode with Tim Sanders, he explains this technology in detail, but it's he has developed a solution to negate the harmful radiation waves coming in from 5G or just even our phones in general, any microwave waves. So, and it is a patch that you put on the back of your phone. You know, we all see the Organite patches. There we go. You see the Organite stuff, but this is supposed to be far superior to that. And it basically balances our field around us, stops any headaches, anxiety, all this stuff that we don't even realize is being caused by this radiation. And it has all kinds of benefits when you're not being affected by it. You know, you sleep better, all that stuff. This is what it looks like if you order it from the website, which the link will be below. It just comes, you can pick however many patches you want. And it explains how to use them and, you know, the benefits and blah, 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 all that stuff. You know, basically creates a field around your body against the radiation. You can put it on microwaves, smart meters, anything.
Wi-Fi router.
Yeah, Wi-Fi router, all that stuff. So it's definitely awesome. Definitely awesome. And if you listen to Tim talk about it and really break down how this works, it's using basically Nikola Tesla based technology. They're developing this stuff over in London, so it's pretty cool. So if you're interested in checking it out, watch the podcast, go to the website, click the link below.
We'll have a link in the description.
Yeah, there you go. Well, anyway, yeah. So welcome to the show, Joy. How are you doing tonight?
I'm great and really happy to be here with you both. Thanks for having me on.
Yes, absolutely. So if anybody doesn't know who Joy is, she might be most well known in the community for her being creator and host of Sci-Fi and Comedy Decrypted, which is, I guess it's on YouTube is the only place you really release it. Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, no, yes. Right now I have it just on YouTube.
So, yeah, and you also like, I believe that, you know, you have your spiritual teacher, you're a professional spiritual teacher, a channeler, medium, a psychic medium, intuitive guidance, or whatever, the whole spectrum. So we'll turn it over to you and let you tell us all about it.
Sure.
If we want to just start off and maybe give us a brief rundown of what this Sci-Fi and Comedy Decrypted is and what your goal is, and then we'll just go from there.
Sure. No, thanks. Sci-Fi and Comedy Decrypted, it's a labor of love. It's something that I just started about a year ago. I actually just picked it up again recently for a new season because I in between the first and the second, I had some personal, just lifey life things come up and, you know, family first and all that. So kind of had to go on a little bit of a hiatus, but just this beginning of this fall, we got going with it again. And the reason why I even decided to do the project in the first place is that I, for years, have noticed that a lot of Hollywood productions, mass media entertainment in general, has embedded a lot of mass mind control messages, symbolism hidden in plain sight and whatnot. And I became aware of how intentional that is and the impact that it has on our mass consciousness at large. And being someone that's always just been a real big fan and aficionado of comedy and science fiction, you know, it just kind of was something I just decided to kind of give a try at, in that I thought, wow, you know, if I'm noticing these things, I think maybe other people are too, you know, especially when we're seeing how powerful of a tool it is for like the deep state and, these certain groups that are really trying to, steer the direction of humanity as a whole. So that's what really motivated me into that work. But it's funny, the seed was kind of planted many years ago, even before I guess you could say I was into anything conspiratorial, or you know what I'm saying, or maybe even over 20 years ago in the late 90s. It was just this one moment where I'm sitting with a friend who even they were not, again, we were not just sitting there talking about conspiracy theories or anything like that. We're just sitting there watching this film, and it was I don't even remember what it is as a thing, but I know that it was like an action movie. It had to do with war. And my friend turned to me and he goes, do you notice that whenever there's a new president coming into power or new leader, and it's almost like they start grooming us ahead for what's about to come. And Bush Jr. had just gotten in office, and this was maybe months before, well, no, this was years before 9/11, but it was just interesting because I thought, I think you're right. I think you're onto something there. I did notice kind of like this pattern that depending on the who was in power and what was going on, the films were often reflective of kind of maybe what they were wanting us to go along with. I remember thinking this similar, thinking something similar when I saw Eyes Wide Shut, not that maybe a year later. I wasn't really well educated about what the Illuminati was, or, what these secret occult groups were, but I just had this intrinsic awareness of what I was seeing on film was more than just a story. And then I remember it wasn't too far after that it was released that sorry, what's his name? Kubrick, that he
Stanley
passed.
Kubrick?
Yeah, that he had passed away. And there was a lot of scuttlebutt around that because they were saying that he may have been killed for putting that film out, because it came too close to the truth, and that Tom Cruise and Nicole Kidman were actually, they, at one point, said that they thought maybe that was true. And then they were quickly ostracized and attacked in the media, I believe, for it. And it's not that I think that they're necessarily uncompromised people today, but I just thought it was very interesting. It just stuck with me. So over time, I kind of was paying attention subconsciously, whether or not I was really actively, I wasn't sitting there just decoding everything. But that's kind of where that seed, I think, started initially.
Yeah, and that movie, knowing what we know now, if you watch that movie, that is the truth.
It's ritual
Right
on
there.
film.
Yeah, exactly. And actually, there's some deleted scenes that are even more disturbing if you actually get a hold of the original copy, the deleted scenes. But so explain to us. So you basically take a movie in an episode and break it down and kind of just point out all the places that, the symbolism and all that stuff. Is that what you do, or break down an episode for us?
Sure. Well, at the beginning, the first season, I was mostly interviewing guests and focusing on their work when they first became aware that their favorite works were more than just stories. Like, for example, I had John D'Souza on, who is the real X-Man, who better than to discuss the X-Files with, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that was amazing. And so the first season was more or less focused on the guests, and I still will continue to have some great guests on where we can do that, and have those discussions. But this season I brought in, Sci-Fi and Comedy Decrypted live. And in those episodes, I do take a particular franchise or piece of work and have a live interactive discussion with the audience where we sit there and review and decrypt, the underlying meanings of the films or the shows or literature, as well as the creators, because often the creators are where a lot of interesting information also comes from as far as the why the film was made. Because for me, it's not only about looking what they've put into the work, but why did it even get made, and also getting more awareness around what part the big studios play, the actors, because a lot of the actors that participate in these films have very interesting stories in themselves. And we just have a lot of from there.
Yeah, there's definitely a lot that goes on before the movie, even before the script, the screenplay, before that even gets in the hands of the director. You know, who's writing this? You know, some of the stuff we know is the CIA. What other agencies or black budget programs are putting out this information? There's people on the inside. Uh, it's definitely not happening by accident. These scripts are entering our consciousness.
It's so true. You know, Jay Dyer is an excellent person to look into for just looking at Hollywood. He's probably one of the few people that I know of that are really prolific and taking a real deep look at Hollywood and the ritualization that's gone into it. Going back to its inception, and even going back further. Even when I was, looking really at how did Hollywood start? How do these big studios, start building their momentum? And really the idea of using literature or film or entertainment and theater to direct public opinion and the mass consciousness really goes back to ancient Greece, back to political satires when they were using political poets and whatnot to help influence one side or the other. And as we'll see, that's going on apparently to this day, if not on a much larger scale, especially since the invention of the big magic box, the television.
Yeah.
I mean, radio was a big deal. Radio was a big deal. But once television came, they had their, lack of a better word, the deep state or whatnot, they had their foothold. And it was often running from there. The studios, even going back to the 1920s, the World War I, World War II, they were very much using Hollywood as a propaganda machine, just direction of the global masses.
Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah, like war films, like Pearl Harbor and all the stuff. Like they put these movies out, like claiming like this is the true story of what happened, when really it's potentially a false flag operation. So, but they're putting this story out to help mold us all and shape the society and whatever. We all know we all know how that works, but they do this a lot in war movies. That's a big one.
The USO, as a matter of fact, was supposedly part of the big agenda of the deep state going back when to Bob Hope, and all those folks were supposedly a big part of, those programs. And the propaganda machine just kind of went into even if you look at old literature, Mary Shelley's Frankenstein, that was kind of the original AI prophecy type of story. There was a really interesting series that was put out by Ridley Scott, and I think it was only about 7 or 8 years ago, called The Prophets of Science Fiction. And I felt he laid a lot out there in that, because he really went into the, lack of a better term, old school science fiction creators, and especially with literature, even predating film, and how a lot of them claim to have divine inspiration behind these works, especially, and it was interesting too, even H.P. Lovecraft and whatnot, that they were supposed to be being influenced by dreams or by or certain fears, having prophecies. Philip K. Dick supposedly was receiving this external guidance, in experiencing different timelines, which kind of led him to write his books, which then were the inspiration for Blade Runner. I was just mentioning in the last episode last week of our live show that James Cameron claimed to have dreamt Terminator.
Really?
And that just came to him in a dream, supposedly. Whether or not these are MK Ultra dreams or just organic dreams.
And we hear the same we hear a lot of rock stars say the same thing. A lot of the songs that you can't escape from. Every sports stadium in the world plays them every time. Those songs aren't accidentally popular. And if you really listen to the writer, how they came up with the idea, they'll have something like that. It just came to them in a dream, or they heard a voice or something.
Isn't that something?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Have you guys seen or heard of the movies Iron Sky? It's about
Heard of it.
It's about Hitler, like developing UFOs, and that whole thing, and then the sequel is about so something happens on Earth, so they have to go to the moon. They have their German base on the backside of the moon. They go to the moon, and they're living there because Earth is essentially destroyed. Well, now the moon's getting ready to get destroyed, and they discover that the Earth is hollow, and there's civilizations inside Earth. So then they go back to Earth and to inner Earth.
Gosh.
And then there's dinosaurs and stuff down there, and then they like Hitler's riding the back of a T-Rex. Like it's really like it's really like B film sci-fi, but there's so much disclosure. It's very cheesy, but so much disclosure. It's almost like it's like straight up in your face, so real that people would never believe it.
Wow.
Yeah, well, that's what I've learned, especially with a lot of sci-fi. It's like they put so much disclosure in those because that's the way they're getting out a lot of the truth of what's going on. And it's like they view it as like we're telling everyone what we're doing by putting it out in these sci-fi and fiction movies and stories, and without coming out and blatantly saying this is the truth of what's happening. They're putting it all out there, and because that's how the magic works, with that. That's how they kind of get around the universal karmic laws. It's like, well, we're putting it out there. We're not hiding anything, even though they are. They're still putting it out there. So,
no, that's just it's all part of the operation. It's standard procedure for them anymore. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, and even television. Television was. I grew up in the country when I was coming up, so I didn't have cable television or anything like that for a long time. But we had like 4 channels, and if it got windy, you had 2. But I grew up on like PBS and a lot of old reruns of a lot of series and things like that. And what was really interesting even for me to learn later on is just how many of these television series and even PBS series like Sesame Street and whatnot had a lot of embedded messages and hidden meanings and things. I mean, Jim Henson himself was quite an interesting character. Supposedly Sesame Street was part of the MK Ultra program.
Really?
And yeah, I mean, don't get me wrong. I grew up on Sesame Street. I mean, it's
me too. Yeah.
near and dear, but at the same time, now I think
it makes sense. Yeah.
It makes sense. Yeah. Because there were some themes that
Jim Henson, I mean, look at the Dark Crystal. You've seen that movie, right?
There you go.
We discussed that one just a few weeks ago. It's funny because that was with the new series that came out.
I haven't seen the new one yet. I want to. I need to see it. Yeah.
He supposedly got the inspiration from that. Well, what I had read is that according to one of his screenwriters, that he made it mandatory that those working very closely with the film read Seth Speaks by Jane Roberts. He was in a very spiritual time of his life, apparently, when he was making the original film, according to people around him. And he was raised Christian Scientist.
Really?
But then had, even to the point of teaching Sunday school in his early 20s, but then departed from that. At some point he did denounce his faith. And it was really a little bit ambiguous as to why that was specifically. But apparently the Dark Crystal was supposed to have some of his own personal spiritual philosophies really embedded into it. It was really his baby. He had worked on it a long time. He had already been in the industry almost 20 years before he had even, really made it big as a filmmaker, a creator. I don't think the Muppets got made until, he'd already been going at it for almost 20 years. And then some really famous entertainer in Britain kind of bankrolled the Muppets, and then that took off. And then the Dark Crystal was a big departure kind of from that. And apparently that was part of the critical acclaim at the beginning, because people were used to Jim Henson and they're thinking they're going to see this film with Muppets and
happy-go-lucky. And it's like, whoa. Yeah. What is this?
Yeah.
And yet it has so much symbology in it about spiritual ascension, referring to an external savior, the whole idea of the one world government trying to be established. You have the Dark Crystal, inner earth, artificial means to enhance oneself.
It's like every aspect of disclosure, pretty much. It's all in there. It
was a fun one to look at. It has so much. And then the new series, it's really seems to be falling in keeping with that, I would say, because his family actually did maintain a certain amount of creative control, I guess, going forward. But
now, how do you feel about like scary movies, as far as like horror films, as far as disclosing like the negative practices, the satanic practices that a lot of these whatever I'm trying to say, elites
dark occult practices and things.
But do you think that is that's what we're seeing in a lot of these films? It's not just a scary movie. It's like, I think when you watch one of those movies, like that energy enters your household. I'm a firm believer of that, and it's really affecting the person's life. It's not just a movie. Maybe I'm insane for thinking that, but I believe that could be the case.
From my experience and research, I think that's 110% the case. The mind, I believe that the mind is the ultimate weapon. Once they have your mind done, if you're not the master of your own mind, then really it's going to be a whole grab bag of things that happen in your life, because you're not going to be the director of your show. With horror films particularly, I have struggled. I really can't watch them these days, and that's the reason being, I think, as disturbing as it is to think about, they're putting many real world rituals and symbolism that they use to try and terrorize humanity into being just afraid to even go out your front door, to be afraid to even go into your own inner world. Fear is usually the motivating factor, I find, behind any control system. Separation from our own mind and fear, separation of heart, those are the ultimate control tools. Especially the really sadistic horror films like Saw and the Batman, the Dark Knight films. I won't watch them now. I saw the earlier ones, but when I realized what was going on, and not because I thought I was that susceptible personally, I just didn't want to support it. I mean, I read about them. So, I watched clips so I get the gist so I can speak to them. But I think they're the more recent examples of how they're inciting dark magic into film. And
absolutely.
These shootings and whatnot. Now, I'm not saying that the shootings, they didn't have more of a heavy hand maybe in engineering these acts to take place than the movies themselves. I mean, I'm not just saying someone went in and they just went berserk, but clearly, just like The Crow is another example I like to use of that, with Brandon Lee. I can remember seeing that movie when it first came out in the theater. And he was unfortunately, died during the making of it by there was supposed to be a prop that was a firearm that had blanks in it, and it went wrong, and he shot himself.
Yeah.
And if you look at the film itself, it's a very dark film, very, very dark. You'll kind of look at the Bruce Lee empire and whatnot, I've been a huge fan of Bruce Lee my whole life. There was a mass consciousness effect from that film at that time when that happened. No one left that film unaffected.
Yeah.
It was really it was a powerful thing to understand, to start to understand what was going on. And I'm noticing this increasingly now with certain films. It does seem as if they're trying to entice us into participating in their own ritual.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, either that, or their favorite thing is probably you watch the movie, you're scared to death, you leave, and like, well, at least good thing that stuff's not real. They want you to think like it's, so you're getting fed the medicine, but basically you don't realize you are.
Right. So yeah, exactly. So it gives it the giggle factor to, kind of just, oh, it's just in movies, and oh, definitely, the boogeyman, that's not, that's just,
just a
Yeah.
movie. Yeah.
And so if anyone talks about stuff, it's, oh, you got it from this movie or this show. And
I think you see that a lot in comedy, which is almost more subtle because they really get us to let our defenses down. As much as I love science fiction, comedy was my first love because it was one of those things when I was really struggling as a young person. I found a lot of comfort in comedy, and it was one of those places where I felt safe to escape. And yet I've gained an understanding that comics, you look at what a comic or comedian is, even in the archetype of a comic, you look at the Joker, the magician, the fool, and even in esoteric teachings, they're actually one of the most powerful archetypes that exist, because they're really about transformation. They're about the human personality, and they are ones that steer often public opinion. And who hasn't seen a comic who we know and love, like perfect example, Robin Williams, and then suddenly they go and play a very dark role. There's almost nothing more off-putting than seeing a comedian do a dark role because they're so good at it.
Yeah.
They're tapping into something very intrinsic. Comedians have to be, to be good at being a comedian, you have to be intuitive. You have to read that room so fast. Smart as a whip, and very socially and culturally aware. I think there's some of the most genius artists of the entertainment industry, and that's why they're used so heavily in talk shows now, especially political talk shows and TV and whatnot, because again, they disarm us, right? When you get to laughing about these things, they become much easier to talk about. Now, and that could be a good thing. Don't get me wrong. I love humor, and I think it can be very heart-centered humor and it can be a beautiful, beautiful tool. We need laughter, otherwise we do fail to thrive, but it could also be a really powerful weapon.
Yeah, that's one of the things they're great at, is taking a dark aspect, a dark situation, and making light of it. They can make a joke they can make child sex trafficking seem funny. And, just like that, I haven't watched it because I refuse to. I don't even know if it's real, but I've seen it floating around, the Will Ferrell comedy skit that jokes about child trafficking, basically. And there's like shows like there's like children in like dog kennels and stuff in cages, and it's supposed to be a comedy skit. I didn't watch it. I don't know if you guys know what I'm talking about.
I haven't seen that one yet, amazingly.
It was like a day or two ago.
They're ramping it up. I was going to watch the new Saturday Night Live, and that sounds like something that
I have seen a lot of like pedophilia being put in comedy over the last just like few years or so.
Yes,
as like haha, and it's like,
Family Guy.
yeah,
They have a mainstay pedophile on Family Guy.
yeah, perfect example. Yeah,
And everybody thinks it's hilarious when I mean, it was just, oh, well, Seth, he just makes fun of everyone. He kind of came from that. Well, there's nothing's off limits.
yeah,
Right.
yeah,
And then suddenly we're just all having a giggle at the fact that there's a creepy pedophile that's trying to hit on the kid next door every day.
yeah, yeah,
And even locks him in the basement in an episode. And all this really, and it's, yeah.
yeah,
It's an attempt to normalize it. It's been happening, and now that shit's hitting the fan, they're ramping everything up.
Yeah.
And I don't know. It's crazy right now.
Well, Saturday Night Live was going to be one in the next couple of weeks that I do. I have to get caught up with the new season, actually, but I'm noticing they're going the topics now, and they're just getting. Saturday Night Live is actually one of the ones that are really prolific and have had some very interesting characters. And I mean, you got Dan Aykroyd, the Men in Black, Jim Belushi, Blues Brothers, the whole. They've been trying to put the whole. I guess you'd say UFO conspiracy type narratives out there, but with a mockery around it. And yet when you look at like Dan Aykroyd, for example, who's very active and
he's very into ETs and UFOs. Yeah.
And, he told a story not too long ago, or I've read in articles where, he said he felt like a daughter to Britney Spears, and that he was on the phone with her one day. I think he was on set doing some for Saturday Night Live.
You mean to say he felt like a father to Britney Spears? You said daughter.
Sorry.
Yeah. I was wondering, but I was like, really?
This makes it so much more complicated. No. Sorry. Flip it, reverse it. That he had become like a father to her, father figure. So I guess he to explain why that they talked a lot, and I guess he had some kind of some experience on set with some men in black coming on the set, and he was telling Brittany about this. And I'm reading this article going, yeah, you don't just have conversations with Britney Spears and write about it. No, you don't.
Yeah.
And you don't just dress like the Men in Black for years and just suddenly, oh, I'm kind of into the ET thing, and I'm totally unbiased, and I'm an independent experiencer. Never mind, this whole thing I'm in has been trying to steer the direction of public opinion about this topic for over 30 years.
Yeah.
They've had many other skits about the ET abductees, and I mean they're hilarious in their own right. I mean, I'm not, nothing against they're really good at it, but those themes have been there. Coneheads. And then we have also just the political leanings. Eddie Murphy, he's become kind of an interesting character to look at. I mean, there's probably not one comedian from the SNL cast over the years that doesn't have some kind of interesting background or story, or and even Lorne Michaels, the creator himself, was he's a very big figure and big part of Hollywood and almost Canadian royalty. So Saturday Night Live has been a big part of steering that machine for many years with comedy. You can't throw a stone at a comedian without there being some relationship to that show.
Sure.
Worldwide, it seems.
Totally.
I actually met Dan Aykroyd in Las Vegas when I was like 22.
Really?
Yeah, and we were down there on Halloween, which is ironic. We're doing this a day before.
Yeah.
Yeah, wow.
He was dressed up as the Blues Brothers or the Men in Black.
Nice.
And we actually just were coming in the casino the same time he was, and we said hi to him, and I don't even remember the conversation, but he was cool. So I don't know why I just had to add that in there.
No, well, I've always admired who doesn't like Dan Aykroyd? I remember Dragnet with him and Tom Hanks and the whole Illuminati. Well, it wasn't it was that whole scene with the Ku Klux Klan, and they're in this kind of they walk in this like satanic ritual, and they had to go undercover as like infiltrating this big like ritualistic sacrifice and this and that. Then he was in like Spies Like Us, which was about the whole Cold War thing. And I started to look at just his work, and then Coneheads, the Blues Brothers, and then he comes out with being a contributor to MUFON, and just kind of, I just kept thinking, oh, that's interesting.
Yeah.
I mean, not just exclusively him, but he's been particularly more upfront and outspoken about it. And then I started to think, well, why?
Yeah.
Oh, and then I'm going, oh,
Yeah.
because you are supposed to be.
Yeah.
And he was just on Joe Rogan's podcast talking all about.
I was just gonna say that I listened to a little bit.
I forgot about that. That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I was trying to get a read on him there of like, what is this guy? Is he like being used for that narrative, or is he just on his own interested in this and genuinely just curious and like done his research? And I couldn't really tell. It could have gone either way for me from that, just from what I watched there. But it seemed like I don't think he's too much into the spiritual side of things at all. You know, he's still very like, at the very least, he thinks the ETs exist. They're here. They're flying around. There are other places in the universe, and we have their technology, and so we have our own stuff too. And kind of that whole general like
nuts and bolts aspect.
Nuts and bolts, more the nuts and bolts narrative, at least. Even if he's not aware or being used for the nefarious stuff, he's at least just in the nuts and bolts. And it did seem like he was a little bit like on the side of they could be dangerous, we need to be careful, like we you know, like it's kind of like the ETs are they just view us as like these, you know, we're humans that can't defend ourselves, so they can do whatever they want, and we need to like acknowledge that. So, you know, it just takes out the whole spiritual aspect of everything, where it's like they actually have compassion for us and would love us or want to help us. It's like we're just these things to be used and exploited by them.
Maybe that's why I thought we should be Ghostbusters.
yeah, maybe.
Yeah. No, I mean, those are questions I've asked myself almost about every entertainer that I have to look into. You know, I try not to condemn anyone, you know, and for one thing, it's probably easy even for me to, I mean, I assume anyone that's willingly participating or by under duress in these narratives are just as traumatized and influenced as the victims, usually. You know, predators are often made, not born, in my opinion. And Dan Aykroyd is one of many that has also been outspoken about the fact that he's had some, I think, emotional and mental health issues, and is kind of reclusive in his downtime. And he's an interesting bird, if nothing else, to read about, for sure. Even if he himself, like you said, was not cognizant of what was going on, I think the writing and the mechanism that he tries to get involved with definitely has wants us to follow their agenda for disclosure. With the limited hangouts and whatnot that seem to be around.
Whether he's aware of it or not. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
I was just gonna say that I always wonder like how much these people are actually aware of. Like they might sign on or agree to do something having no real understanding of what they just agreed to do.
Yeah.
So
or being influenced, you know, by like MK Ultra, you know, or just being messed with.
Yeah,
exactly.
I'm sure there's a lot of that going on too.
It's a whole recipe of stuff, you know. It's coming at them from all angles, and it's coming at us from all angles. You can't escape it. You just have to take control of your own mind, like you said, and just really learn how to decipher what's what.
There you go. The sovereignty of the mind, going into these things with awareness, is a very powerful place to come from. I mean, it's really what my work, even before, I mean, my psychic work and as a spiritual teacher has always been grounded in developing, heart and mind resonance as a way of making us, able to be just the powerful co-creators that we are of our own reality. So we're not always deferring out here and looking out here for that external savior or susceptible to mass mind control techniques, because once you're aware, then those things really do start to fall flat. You know?
Absolutely.
Yep.
And that's part of the reason, like, I quit watching scary movies. I quit watching most movies, unless, I have to finish the Star Wars series. I gotta go see that once it comes out. But
Oh yeah.
in those films themselves, there's a lot of secret space program disclosure within Star Wars.
It's mentioned in the raw material, which is a work that the law of one is a spiritual principle that's been a big touchstone of my work for a long time. And the raw material, one of the few books it references is Star Wars as being, at a very rudimentary level, the best analogy of kind of what we've been going through from the transition of, say, third density, or some people think of the third dimension, in spiritual terms, consciousness terms, to the fourth, and so forth. That no pun intended, me the fourth. It really does touch on so many things that we're going through right now, and the polarity, the light and the dark side, trying to become the masters of our own domain.
Well, even the Force is basically is essentially what is real.
Yes,
it's real, and it's just, we're all capable of. We could move something with our mind. We just don't know how. We're not taught to do it.
No, inside us is a Jedi. Inside every one of us is a Jedi. That's one of my favorite analogies to use when I'm working with someone. For those that are really familiar with that concept, if anything, I use that a lot. And it's not that there's not lots of female science fiction people, but for some reason with men in particular, when I start talking about Star Wars and the Force, the spiritual concepts for them get very grounded very fast. Because it's an archetypal explanation of what we're going through. There's so many powerful metaphors embedded within it that, within us is a very powerful Jedi, that we just need to, once we tune into that, the dark forces really won't have any sustainable ground to work with. Because the way I see it, everything that we experience, on some level, we're co-creating. And like you were saying earlier, both of you touched on it, that they need us to give, they being whomever's trying to enslave us. You can kind of pick, anytime a group is trying to enslave another group, they need our permission. They need our minds to go with them. So, once we become our own Jedis, Darth Vader really can't do much to us at that point.
Nailed it.
Well, he's dead now anyway, so we don't have to worry.
Oh, that's true. Tell the next, no. Tell the reboot. No. Okay.
He's back.
So let's shift gears a little bit. Tomorrow is Halloween. And I don't know, that's another thing we've been fooled. Another aspect we've been fooled, or how we've been fooled. I cannot talk today. So the real meaning of Halloween is not what we think it is, and that's just that goes along basically with every holiday. I would have to say, Christmas. Okay, I don't have to name them all, but yeah, I was just curious if you had any insight or any opinions on what Halloween means to you.
Oh, no, it's a great question. And it's evolved for certain over many years. I was never deep down very comfortable with this idea that it was supposed to be a fright fest this time of year, like this ritual. I didn't get it. I didn't get the whole, the celebrating fear once a year. Essentially, I think James Spader said it once, he just thought how, You know, how interesting that once a year we get dressed up in funny little costumes just to celebrate fear, when
Yeah.
really that's the thing that you would think we've been trying to overcome. And, you know, many ancient cultures, this time of year was about much more grounded and spiritually symbiotic, symbiotic with the earth type of rituals. It was more about just honoring that external and internal harvest. It's a time of transformation, transcendence. This is usually about the time of year too that we spiritually start kind of downshifting to kind of get ready to go into wintertime. Well, depending on where you live, of course, a bit, but we all go through the same cycles, basically.
Yeah.
And so this cycle in particular is when we're trying to harvest what we've culminated since the spring and the summer. And our dreams accelerate. People will usually start to know, if they don't notice, if you start to kind of pay attention, our dreams start getting really ramping up. You're probably less likely to remember them this time of year, actually, because we have so many that unless you're really actively working with them, it can be a lot to take in. It's a very beautiful time of year. But yeah, the Western culture has really adopted, unfortunately, this kind of satanic, like a better word, unheart-centered ritual of Halloween that many years ago was just about celebrating transformation, and it was the original New Year. It was really the original New Year.
Yeah. I think the cabal might be a reason for steering it that way as well. And Halloween's a big dark ritual day for them as well, unfortunately. And they use the energy of Halloween for that reason. So, you know, it makes sense that they would kind of steer it to become what it's become, so they can kind of like harvest the energy we all put into it in that way. And
that's true.
They're probably hanging out in some type of cloaked craft above these haunted houses, collecting all this fear that everybody's releasing.
Yeah. Well, and it just goes into the earth grid as well, and affects mass consciousness, and that affects everyone.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. It's supposed to be on the occult calendar, a very powerful time for rituals, light or dark. But like you were saying, because they've got us so entrained with it currently that, yeah, the more they can sit there and it's a fuel, it's a feed. I know David Wilcock and Corey Good, they speak to Loosh, you know, that term Loosh. And in the Law of One, that's addressed, and a lot of other spiritual, even the Bible. I mean, fear, that separation from, you know, that is a fuel for darker entities and forces. It's because it's a cannibalistic state of being to be in a dark or service to self orientation. After a certain point, is almost cannibalistic because you have to feed constantly. It's like chasing the dragon and like heroin addiction. I mean, you got to get that fix. Like Darth Vader, you know, or all those. I mean, when the Force starts to, you know, that's why Darth Vader, when Anakin, I mean, you can see when people are losing their life force physically. I mean, they change. You can see when somebody's not right, when they're in the dark zone. It's not something they can easily mask, especially if they've been in it for a long enough time. Even looking at certain politicians and whatnot, they just look like Vader. Lack of a better word.
Sure.
Yeah.
It's hard road. Yeah.
Exactly.
So what is your best ghost story? Have you had any paranormal experiences that you wouldn't mind sharing with us?
Not at all. I've had a lot of paranormal experiences, but as far as one that is, I guess you'd say more in keeping with the theme of Halloween, I'll go back to an experience I had many years ago. I had a paranormal society in Seattle. And this was before I was really aware of why and how we experience darker or lower vibrational entities. I wasn't aware that our vibration has as much to do with what type of experiences we can have with beings, multidimensional beings, either embodied or disembodied. And so what I wasn't aware of is if you go looking for just experiences, you're going to get them. You know what I mean? In other words, you're kind of giving them permission. There's a certain amount of permission being given. And so you're going to get a mixed bag of things. And one of my earlier investigations was actually kind of cliche. It was just some friends of mine and I were going to a local cemetery, a very, very old cemetery in the heart of Seattle, just after the sun was going down. But because we kind of missed before it had gotten really dark, we decided we didn't want to push our luck and trespassing, you know, after dark and all that. But it had kind of a nice pathway where you can just walk around the perimeter. And then just on the other side of the street was just kind of residential. So a couple of my friends kind of decided to go off one direction. And then my girlfriend and I decided to just walk down this other side of the cemetery. And so we're just walking. And, you know, at that point, we weren't really expecting anything to happen. We kind of just thought we missed our opportunity to really do much of anything. So we were just really just going for a walk, you know, and just kind of taking it in. And I want to say we got maybe halfway down the road, and we're just chit-chatting, and all of a sudden we just both stop at the same time. And we both just turn and look at this spot in the cemetery. It couldn't really see much, though. It was very dark. And I can't explain it, and neither could she, but it was just this feeling of, we have to leave. We have to leave right now. Yeah. And just as we were turning to leave, I started to feel this pressure just pushing on me really heavy, and this really low hum just started vibrating like my skull. I couldn't breathe very well. I was, and I didn't even know, I mean, I hadn't said a word to her. We were just trying to kind of book it across the street, you know, because it was weird. She kind of had the same feeling, but we hadn't really verbalized to each other what we're experiencing. And then as we get to the other side of the street to walk back towards our car, I hear her go, "Oh my God, do you feel that? Joy, it's not stopping. Joy, it's not stopping." And then I realized she's experiencing it too. And I realized we were having an attack. I wasn't nearly as versed as I am now in dealing with such things, but I remember something my guides once told me to try and if you had to send something away that you didn't want to give permission to, and I just said, you know, I was lucky to remember it because I was pretty freaked out. It was starting to really feel like I was going to not be able to continue walking. And I said, progress and move on, progress and move on. And I was actually thinking it. I wasn't even saying it. I was just like, progress and move on, progress and move on. And as I'm walking, I just start to feel lighter and lighter and lighter. And then finally, by the time we got close to the car, it was like, she's like, "Oh, she goes, I can breathe now." I go, "And so can I."
Yeah, I know that feeling. I went to a paranormal investigation in Onondaga Cave here in St. Louis. They open a cave up for us at night, and a group of 12 people go in there and get free range of the cave. You don't have to follow the walkways and stuff. You can go anywhere you want. It's awesome. And you're ghost hunting, essentially. Well, on the way home, see, I didn't put up any type of protection or anything. On the way home, I'm driving home, and I was supposed to go meet up with a friend, and something just entered me. I felt like a wave come over me, and it just made me nauseous, like that super heavy feeling. I almost had to pull over the vehicle. I didn't know what was happening, but then at the same time I did know. I was like, something has just attached itself to me. And for like 2 weeks, my whole life I was just like in this funk. And I went to this psychic fair, and there was a Reiki healer there, and she immediately was like drawn to me or whatever. And she's like, "You want a session, blah, blah, blah." I was like, "No, I just got here. I'm going to walk around." And then I left, and I came back, and she goes, "Okay, so you ready to remove this thing?" And I was like, what do you, she felt it. She goes, as soon as you walked away, she goes, every time there's somebody's attachment, when they walk away from me, I break out in a sweat. And she knew. So then she ended up like removing this thing from me in the middle of this fair. But I know that feeling. It's totally like if it hadn't left you then, it can stick with you. It really can. So that's why it's important to put up protection.
Oh, wow. Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, it's entity attachments and things like that. I know I get asked about them all the time. You know, how do I deal with them? You know, and how do I track them and this and that? But, you know, ultimately it is just about that, you know, realizing that we're more powerful beings and not looking for it. It does help not to go looking for it to a certain extent. I learned that I had to end my paranormal society when I came to the awareness that I was attracting these things.
Sure.
And, you know, and it's innocent enough. I mean, I don't blame people for wanting to explore these things at all. You know, it's a very natural, I think, intrinsic thing within us to do that. But then when we become aware that we're vibrational beings, you know, and that, you know, density literally means like density, you know, like heavy, you know, it's the lighter in density that we become, they just can't really see us. You know, it's almost like we just go up to another octave. And so, you know, we just stop interacting with them after a certain point in our evolution. So they become kind of obsolete in our progression over time, is my understanding, as we spiritually evolve. But while we're kind of still in the duality of this, you know, transition, you know, we're still very eligible to, you know, engage with these forces that, you know, they're always waiting, because that's what it's what they do. You know, I mean, it's just a very natural thing. It's what they do. It's, yeah.
Now, do you believe that like at this particular time of year, the veil is thinner than the rest of the year, and more spirits, for lack of a better term, are able to come enter our reality? Is that, or do you think that's the case, or what do you think about that?
I do believe that there are cycles where there is a certain energies that are supportive of transformation and transitioning. And so, yes, short answer is yes, I do. I do think this is a time, and this is why rituals were performed. Also, I mean, just for benevolent purposes for millennia by certain cultures, because it was a very powerful time to bring in what you wanted, which of course can also bring in what you don't want if you're focused on the other end of it, right? Yeah. So I really do. I mean, I think this can be an amazing, I mean, it's an amazing time of year, really. It's just how you wield it. You know, it's always the intention, as they say.
Yeah.
We bring to it.
Exactly.
Absolutely.
Intention's everything, really. Yeah.
Yeah.
Aaron, you got any ghost stories for us?
I really don't have any kind of paranormal stories like that. I've heard a lot. I've had a lot of other people tell me some crazy stories.
That reminds me of a comedian. Is like, do you jog? It's like, no, but I know people that do jog.
I see people jog a lot.
Yeah.
Does that count?
Yeah. I know.
I have heard some crazy stories though, and some from some people that I have been pretty close with, that I know for a fact they're not lying to me. They're not making this up. At the very least, somehow they believe this is real, whether it happened or not. That like 100%, you know. So, and which is why hearing a lot of the stories that have happened to you, that you tell to me, that, you know, gives me at least so much credibility to it, because I know you really well, and I know you're not making this stuff up. And there's something,
Oh,
me, right?
Yeah. Enjoy too. Yeah.
Oh, that's okay. No,
Yeah.
no, I appreciate what you're saying. No, and same here. I've heard some stories where, wow, yeah, that, you know, you can see it in a person too. I mean, really, when they've experienced something.
Yeah.
That,
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
You can tell, yeah, they're it's coming from a real place in them. They're not just making
Yeah.
this up.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's some type of that's where our intuitive abilities come in. You know,
Mhm.
if the more intuitive you are, you really can tell if somebody is being deceptive or not, as far as telling, hey, this happened, you know, or this didn't happen.
Yeah, I was just saying with dreams, for some reason in particular, I think the majority of my um, more negative experiences came in dreams when I was more susceptible and things like that. But, you know, as far as having things more in the 3D, you know, things like that, um, you know, throughout my lifetime, there were some interesting things, you know, but it was usually, you know, there was usually something else involved. You know, there was usually some variable involved, like another person, you know, or because I don't know, I was pretty fortunate in that I always felt some kind of protection since I came in. Um, I I'm pretty lucky because I probably do have 9 lives, as they say, you know, and some of the stuff that I messed with and went into, I probably had to have some kind of find protection going through them.
Sure.
Because I was so curious, you know, and
Yeah.
when you're naive and you don't know what you don't know. So sometimes I did have one entity follow me back and try to get me in a dream. Actually, it was trying to get me to do harm, you know, to others, and I dismissed it immediately. I mean, it didn't take hold on me, but I realized I needed to do some clearing right away. And then there was another where I actually got physically attacked and got bit in a
Ooh,
dream, and I actually
Wow.
woke up bit.
really?
Um, Not to the point of being scarred, but to where I was in a lot of pain. When I was younger, I had a nightmare that I was getting pounded in my legs, and I woke up with terrible, terrible um, leg
Yeah. You know,
bruises and
that's
things.
so interesting because I have heard that before a lot, that people, they'll get hit or something will physically hurt them in a dream. They'll wake up and they'll have like a bruise or a mark
Yeah,
in that exact spot. And
Oh
that's
yeah.
really
yeah,
interesting. It's like somehow it manifests on their body, even though it just happens in the astral or the dream realm. Yeah.
Absolutely.
yeah.
Yeah.
Tyler, that's happened to you before, right? Anything like that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I've never disclosed it yet.
Okay. I just know you've had a lot of like,
As far as waking up with a physical, well, I've woken up in pain, you know, from the certain things, but they were experiences, you know, like
yeah, I know you've had like sleep paralysis and seeing
yeah,
entities in your room and stuff.
yeah,
Yeah,
exactly. But like the reality of waking up and carrying it into your life, you know, the pain.
yeah,
Uh,
Yeah.
the
yeah.
one was I just explained on the Alora show I was just on about how I woke up. My experience was I was thrown on the ground of this craft and we were taken to the moon basically as slaves. And we were on some type of old technology because I could feel the G-force and it was so intense. Your whole body, you couldn't hardly, you felt like you were going to explode. And I woke up out of that experience in the middle of that flight. And I woke up in bed with that pain and it stuck with me. I was curled up in a ball. I couldn't move. It was horrible. And I've never felt anything like it. And I don't know that I ever will because unless I'm on some type of craft that can recreate what I felt, you know.
Wow.
But other than that, yeah, there's been a couple others. Yeah.
Well, our dreams are a time, like with meditation and whatnot, but especially in the sleep, you know, it's when our mind is the most out of the way, our conscious mind. So it's a perfect opportunity for us to explore many different levels and dimensions. And then it's also can be an opportunity for other beings and entities, depending kind of where we're at, to engage as well, because there's just less to get in the way. I've had you know, prophetic dreams, visionary dreams, apocalyptic dreams, and you know, some that you know, you can tell um, were more of a traveling type dream. you know, more of, and then there's some where, you know, I was actually interacting with beings, you know, other beings that were trying to give me information, some prophetic dreams, you know, things like that.
Yeah.
And then I started to realize in meditation, similar things occurring, but it was just much easier in the dream state because we're so out of our own way, you know, and that's what propelled me into working with dreams at a deeper level. It's just something, I've always been a very vivid dreamer, a very sensitive person. And I was introduced to a channeler and a very really good dream analyst when I was about 15 years old, who passed away not too long after. This was back when I was living in California, where I grew up. And a lot of what she taught me really stayed with me, even though I still had so much more to learn. It really stayed with me as far as what our dreams are and what it meant and what their potential was. So ever since that time, when I would have a dream, though, I was aware that it was just such a big part of, you know, who we are and how we experience things, and that it really was just a different octave or a different, you know, phase of our multidimensional nature.
Yeah.
And that when we become aware of it, we can
level. Yeah, it's not a physical like this realm that we're in. It's
the etheric state.
Yes,
the
exactly.
etheric state. There you go. And then when we become aware of that, we can work with them and actually be much more in control, you know, and work with them with intention.
Yeah.
It can be incredibly powerful. And it wasn't until I started doing that, when I really became conscious of working with my dreams, it all changed. I no longer have experiences where I feel in my dreams I'm ever out of a state of control, or I'm really in fear. It's more of just what's happening? If I'm not doing something a certain way that's maybe not in my best interest, my dreams tell me right away. And they may even be a little intense and scary, but I'm aware that's what's happening. And the dreams that I have that involve actual other beings tend to be a little different than other types that I have. So I've kind of learned to distinguish when I'm actually meeting with my guides versus when I'm meeting with just more my archetypal, you know, just clearing dreams or teaching dreams, which we all have each night, you know, and those things. And it's amazing what we can really gain from that, and just the waking time, you know, from working with them. And then it just starts to kind of just, you know, there creates like a synergy, you know, between the waking and the dream state, to where they become this just powerful tool that we have.
Yeah, it is. That's exactly what it is. And if you learn how to use that tool, it can change your life. You know, it really could start steering you in the right direction. I'm guilty of not doing that like I should. I know I need to be writing down my dreams. I just don't wake up early enough to do it. I wake up and give myself 10 minutes to get out the door to go to work, you know.
Yeah, you're like me.
Yeah.
Oh no, I'm a mom. I've written on cereal boxes. No, I understand. I mean, I do this I don't always do it. You know, it's not like I wake up and it's always just, it's just blissful. I've got my little book and I'm just, no, it's not like that every day. But what I've gotten in the habit of, and it's just like martial arts or anything else, you know, it kind of, you know, you just get a practice going, and I will just try and have a pen somewhere, anywhere. I'll write on anything in shorthand as I'm going to, even if it's just a few keywords. And I'll do this after meditation now as well, because when I realized it was such a powerful tool for dreams, I realized I was experiencing a similar issue with meditation. I'd have these messages and great guidance come forward, but if I stopped meditating and then just went into my day or whatever else I was doing, short-term memory, it can go. When I started writing it down, there's actually a synergy that happens when you write something down between the brain and the consciousness that kind of makes it more concrete. It makes it much easier to retrieve, and it kind of opens a pathway it develops like a muscle memory, lack of a better word. Just like when you're exercising a muscle, when you first start working out, okay, it feels kind of sore. You don't feel so great doing it. You might not see a whole lot of difference. And the movement itself might feel clumsy, right? Just like when you're learning a martial art or something like that, or a new skill. But the more we do it, it just becomes second nature. And meditation and accessing these higher levels there's no difference in what I've learned in accessing them between that and just developing a new skill. We're just developing a new muscle memory. And working with dreams is the same way. The more we work with something, it becomes inherently easier, more fluid. And over time, do it long enough, we probably won't have to always write them down and this and that. Just like Bruce Lee didn't have to really think it through before he did his 1-2. Yeah. I mean, it will become fluid. But it's just a starting point for us. And, but the nice thing is, just like any practice though, it's like riding a bike, the more you do it, and then if you get away from it a little bit, you come back to it. It's a lot easier than when you first started, and things like that.
Yeah. Well, this has been totally awesome. We're gonna start wrapping things up. I know you don't have a whole lot longer. So is there any final things that you want to add? Any announcements? Any shows coming up you want to tell us about? Anything like that?
Gosh. Well, for one thing, everyone like, subscribe, and share your channel, because I think you're both amazing. I'm really grateful to be here today again. I really want to help support, other independent creators like yourselves that are just really red pilling the community. So thank you both for that, first of all.
Thank you. Yeah.
Thank you.
And I would love to both have you on the show sometime if you would like to just kind of maybe just continue this conversation,
Yeah,
totally.
No, I would love to hear, the shows and films that have influenced you, because I think a lot of people will gain so much from that, just the fact that these are more than just stories. I think we're all kind of caught up in the mass media entertainment. Who's not affected by that on some level, unless you're living literally in a cave?
Yeah. You're Amish, maybe. Yeah.
Yeah. See, tomorrow night I will be going live on Sci-Fi Decrypted, just although this may air after that. So, but anyways, we'll be just doing Twilight Zone, and then in the following week, I think we're gonna get into Saturday Night Live, which should be great. So hopefully, you guys just, everybody tune in for that if you're drawn to it. And I do, teach workshops and things locally, although I haven't done any real big events lately, mostly just due to like personal, things going on at home that have just had to keep me, a little more grounded this past year. But I'm hoping to get out there and do more speaking engagements this coming year. And no, I just really, like I said, really appreciate being here and an opportunity to have a really fun conversation with both of you.
Yeah. And anybody listening, make sure you like and subscribe her channel, Sci-Fi and Comedy Decrypted. Don't just promote us, We appreciate that. Thank you so much. Do you have a website too, correct? Joyful Evolution, I believe.
I do. Yeah, for anyone that's interested in learning more about what I do professionally as a psychic and dream analyst, my website is joyfulevolution.com. I've been working as a professional psychic since about 2006. And it's just something that I love doing. I love helping people become aware of their own, sovereignty and their own personal power. I want everyone to be their own guru, so to speak. I know that someday being a psychic is going to be silly. When you think about it, I used to pay psychics to tell me. No, I don't mean to dismiss what psychics and many powerful, there's some wonderful light workers out there, but just to speak to that really quick is that there's going to be a time when, what I do will be obsolete. And I think that's amazing, because within us are psychics. I mean, it's like saying, I'm a professional breather. I learned how to breathe.
Yeah.
And same with dreams. But I'm grateful, while we're kind of, some of us just maybe just a couple steps down the road, though, with skills, just like you might go to someone that teaches martial arts to learn Kung Fu. I mean, it's a starting point. So, if you're drawn to my work, that's great. I just, I do love to help people just develop what's more intrinsically within them, and just to have better, more fulfilling, happier lives. And that's really my only goal.
That's beautiful. That's beautiful.
Awesome.
Yes. Yeah. So definitely check out that website if you're listening to this. Thanks for coming on again. This was amazing. Like you said, I'd love to continue it. Definitely some movies I have in mind that influenced me. If you haven't had a movie influence you, something's wrong. Like you say, you're living in a cave or off grid or something. But yeah, so this has been awesome. And make sure you like, subscribe, check us out on all the other platforms. Find us on Twitter.
And make sure you check out Joy's stuff as well.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Yes, absolutely. And check out omniaradiationbalancer.com and protect yourself from all this negative shit that we're being bombarded with.
Yes.
It's important.
Very important.
I'm a firm believer in it. Otherwise, we wouldn't be talking about it. So anyway, thanks for listening, everybody, and good night.
Good night, everyone.
Good night.